I am better off than he is, for he knows nothing and thinks that he knows. I neither know nor think that I know. Socrates. Hello everyone. Excuse my absence for the last couple of days. Been trying to recuperate a little bit better and then have to cough in front of you while I'm trying to talk. I think I'm finally getting better. Said that the last couple of days. Anyways, what I want to do is kind of go over a little bit of Socrates. Plato. And Socrates is in there as well. Hey, maybe even some Aristotle. Who knows? I'll probably replay some videos that I watched, but I really prefer going to the source, so I downloaded the complete works of Plato, which you can get free and read for yourself. And I should probably put in some links and stuff like that, but oh well. Another thing that I want to say is I am doing my first stream on DLive on the Lino blockchain. And someone please tell me if I'm pronouncing Lino correctly or not. I also am not streaming on the Steam blockchain only because there's been an update in the or an upgrade from the Steam blockchain. Sorry, Steam blockchain. I keep saying Steam it. And I will show you what I mean. See there, it says Steam blockchain was upgraded earlier today. So if I even hit refresh, I'm still not there yet. So I can't even give anyone an upvote because it just says that it's just stabilizing right here. You know, that's what it is. It's not that I don't have any Steam power. Who knows, maybe I won't. At any rate, it's gonna be good because I tried getting, that's why I'm so delayed, I tried getting the DTube stream key, but since Steam's down, at least for me, I can't really do anything. At any rate, I will probably upload this on Steam or DTube. And I'll also do my first live stream on DTube. I've never live streamed on DTube. So look for it tomorrow night, maybe day after if tomorrow night's not available. I'll be streaming live, not only on DLive, but on DTube. And also, of course, YouTube, Facebook, Periscope. Okay, so I don't know how I got into Plato all of a sudden. It just happened. And one of the things that I want to do is kind of, a lot of research has been kind of going back into consciousness and going back to Plato. Now, if you don't know about Plato, he's someone, he was I think his real name is Aristocles. He was a pupil of Socrates, who Socrates, as far as I know, he didn't publish any written works, and it was all through Plato. And Plato's student, one of his pupils, was Aristotle. So you got these three philosophers. I'm pretty sure everyone learned about them in school. I learned about them in school, and I was like, psh, I don't need to know anything about these fools. They're 2,500 years old. Like, they're going to teach me anything I need to know. Well, holy smokes. I was wrong. You know, that's what happens when you're a kid. Okay, so maybe I'm wrong. 300 years later. This is by an article by Quartz. It's just one of the first things that came up with on Google search, consciousness and Plato. So this is by Olivia Goldhill, June 18, 2016. 2,300 years later, Plato's theory of consciousness is being backed up by neuroscience. Right? Neuroscience is Ebon, you're talking about neuroscience. You're talking about crazy stuff. You're talking about conspiracy theory. Here we go, neuroscience. conspiracy theory of the 21st century. Okay, in 2008, neuroscientist Giulio Tononi, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that right, at the University of Wisconsin-Madison Center for Sleep and Consciousness put forward his integrated information theory, which is currently accepted as one of the most compelling explanations about what consciousness is. Let's look at that. It's a theoretical framework for understanding consciousness. All right. I'm repeating myself now. I don't know. Let's see. It may be for another time, but I'm pretty sure that article is going to go through it. Anyways, you know where to look for it yourself. Okay. One of the central claims of the theory. Excuse my eyesight. Where is my? Crap. Forget it. One of the claims of the theory is that for consciousness to exist, it must have cause-effect power on itself. I'll read the whole thing. It looks like a short article. Neurologist Melanie Boley, a resident at UW's, not UW, I guess UW for me is University of Washington. Sorry, UW's University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health, who has worked with Tononi, explains that for anything to exist, it must be able to have an effect. It must be able to make some small difference to something else. Consciousness exists for itself and by itself, says Boley, thus it should have cause and effect on itself. Boley is currently working with other researchers to develop a mathematical framework to test the predictions of integrated information theory. I need to do an update on that because this is way back in 2008, or this is 2016 as far as this article. Anyways, but she points out that long before the explanation of consciousness was put forward in such a scientifically rigorous form, the philosopher Plato expressed the idea that for something to exist, it must it must be capable of having an effect, and so consciousness, or being, as Plato described it, is simply power. In the dialogue Sophist, written in 360 BC, Plato wrote, "My notion would be that anything which possesses any sort of power to affect another or to be affected by another, if only for a single moment, however trifling the cause and however slight the effect, has real existence. And I hold that the definition of being is simply power. Just as it's impossible to definitely know what caused the world, we'll never be able to completely prove a theory of consciousness. But Boley believes the current evidence suggests that the integrated information theory is correct, which would then scientifically validate Plato's views from more than 2 millennia ago." Interesting. Now, before I get into the works, maybe I'll get into the works a little. You can download the Republic, which is one of the writings of Plato. Another thing that I actually downloaded was the Complete Plato. And I'm going to kind of talk about the Apology. I think a lot of the quotes and the memes that you see about famous quotes are misattributed to Plato about being wise and therefore knowing nothing. It's actually towards Socrates about the Apology, and it's very simply in its very simple terms. It was really truncated into or concatenated. I don't know. Anyways, it was shortened, let's just say that, to be that one quick sentence. But there's a story to this, in which is that I want to tell. Anyways, let's make sure that I can remember this part. But anyways, the Complete Plato, it kind of gives you a little bit of an intro about Plato. I pretty much told you about it. Anyways, you can read it. And I'll go into the Apology early. And it's a good story. I like it, and I think everyone should know it. And I think it's kind of funny because if you don't know about Socrates, he was tried for being inflicting people, the youth, with his philosophies and his his teachings, and therefore was killed by the state. That's a whole nother topic that I would love to get into maybe another night. And it's pretty fascinating. I think we're getting to that same I missed the whole thing. We're getting to the same state within our state of global state, you could say. Even our local state, I would say federal state, whatever. Either or, and there's so many bugs around here, it's killing me. Okay, I will try to find my place eventually. Let's see. Oracle. Yeah. There we go. Oh, that's what it is. So, that's my bookmark. I should use the bookmarks. Bookmarks. Add bookmark. Alright, good. That solves a lot of things. Alright, again, if you're new to my show, basically what you can do is you can join in the description box. Oh, crud. There's no description box in DLive right now. Oh well, it's only the title. We'll figure it out. Anyways, you'll have to go to YouTube, Periscope, or Facebook to find that. Or let me see. I can actually copy and paste it. No. Here we go. Invite. Copy URL. And therefore, in case you want to join, you can also find it right there on DLive on Lino. Sorry. And there's double me. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and play 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different ones from a TED Ed. That's 4.5 minutes. Tom Ritchie, someone who he always looks like Matt Damon, cracks me up. He's pretty good. One by Northern Diaries Digital Media. One by even Stefan Molyneux. You guys are gonna, I don't know, probably anyone who's doesn't like him might not like it. Anyways, you're gonna listen to him anyway. Haha. The School of Life and Crash Course. So I pretty much know that this is gonna be copyrighted, or not copyright infringed. Anyways, there's going to be some hubbub going on of the live stream with YouTube, possibly Facebook. So if you really want to go and watch this entire show of mine, please watch it on DLive or on DTube. And DTube is not live streaming tonight because of Steam's upgrade earlier today. So therefore, DLive is your only best bet right now if you want to watch uninterrupted. All right, here we go. And I'm not going to show my face. So we shall just go to the share browser.
What is reality? Knowledge? The meaning of life? Big topics you might tackle figuratively, explaining existence as a journey down a road or across an ocean, a climb, a war, a book, a thread, a game, a window of opportunity, or an all too short-lived flicker of flame. 2,400 years ago, one of history's most famous thinkers said life is like being chained up in a cave, forced to watch shadows flitting across a stone wall. Pretty cheery, right? That's actually what Plato suggested in his Allegory of the Cave, found in Book 7 of the Republic, in which the Greek philosopher envisioned the ideal society by examining concepts like justice, truth, and beauty. In the allegory, a group of prisoners have been confined in a cavern since birth with no knowledge of the outside world. They are chained facing a wall, unable to turn their heads, while a fire behind them gives off a faint light. Occasionally, people pass by the fire carrying figures of animals and other objects that cast shadows on the wall. The prisoners name and classify these illusions, believing they're perceiving actual entities. Suddenly, one prisoner is freed and brought outside for the first time. The sunlight hurts his eyes, and he finds the new environment disorienting. When told that the things around him are real, while the shadows were mere reflections, he cannot believe it. The shadows appeared much clearer to him, but gradually his eyes adjust until he can look at reflections in the water, at objects directly, and finally at the sun, whose light is the ultimate source of everything he has seen. The prisoner returns to the cave to share his discovery, but he is no longer used to the darkness and has a hard time seeing the shadows on the wall. The other prisoners think the journey has made him stupid and blind and violently resist any attempts to free them. Plato introduces this passage as an analogy of what it's like to be a philosopher trying to educate the public. Most people are not just comfortable in their ignorance, but hostile to anyone who points it out. In fact, the real-life Socrates was sentenced to death by the Athenian government for disrupting the social order, and his student Plato spends much of the Republic disparaging Athenian democracy, while promoting rule by philosopher kings. With the cave parable, Plato may be arguing that the masses are too stubborn and ignorant to govern themselves. But the allegory has captured imaginations for 2,400 years because it can be read in far more ways. Importantly, the allegory is connected to the theory of forms developed in Plato's other dialogues, which holds that, like the shadows on the wall, things in the physical world are flawed reflections of ideal forms, such as roundness or beauty. In this way, the cave leads to many fundamental questions, including the origin of knowledge, the problem of representation, and the nature of reality itself. For theologians, the ideal forms exist in the mind of a creator. For philosophers of language viewing the forms as linguistic concepts, the theory illustrates the problem of grouping concrete things under abstract terms. And others still wonder whether we can really know that the things outside the cave are any more real than the shadows. As we go about our lives, can we be confident in what we think we know? Perhaps one day a glimmer of light may punch a hole in your most basic assumptions. Will you break free to struggle towards the light, even if it costs you your friends and family? Or stick with comfortable and familiar illusions? Truth or habit? Light or shadow? Hard choices, but if it's any consolation, you're not alone. There are lots of us down here.
Okay, so that was the TED Ed one called Plato's Allegory of the Cave by Alex Gendler. I'm going to now play the Tom Ritchie one. The guy who looks like, don't laugh, he looks like Matt Damon. But this guy's good. Alright, here we go.
Hey there, students. I tell you what, it's time for back-to-school shopping and that sort of thing. And some people are posting some cool things. I saw that Cassie put on her Instagram that she went and bought some notebooks. And what really caught my eye about this is not just that somebody bought some notebooks, but she said that she didn't like the ones the school gave her because they're not pretty enough. You know, you're not pretty enough, the notebooks. And so I'm thinking, like, okay, what is it that somebody sees in a notebook? And, you know, I went over to Staples, not a sponsor. Now, if Staples wants to sponsor me, then, you know, great. But I looked around and I thought, okay, there are so many different kinds of notebooks. You know, you've got different colors here, okay, which my daughter Caroline has put in rainbow order here, which is pretty awesome. And, you know, as far as that goes, we've got those notebooks, okay, so wide ruled, college ruled. Maybe you want one without spirals, but then again, maybe this one's too small. This one has inspirational quotes in it. Okay, so you go in there and it's like, look at this, like, oh, who have we got there? We've got Mark Twain, St. Francis, and I think in the back we've got Thomas Edison telling people not to give up. I guess that's a great one for the back. But then even this. Okay, there's a SpongeBob, you see. All right, so a SpongeBob notebook. Now, it's kind of small, so I don't know what you're going to do with this notebook besides maybe write little notes to somebody or something like that. Not a lot there, but what I'm thinking about here is there are so many different kinds of notebooks, and people have their own preferences for what a notebook is. And I thought that it would be a great way to explain Plato's theory of forms. Now, Mr. Lico was correct. This would be a lot cooler if I were at a car lot. Maybe like that guy, you know, he's got the Lamborghini, you know, he's like, oh, I've got a Lamborghini and here are some books. And it's like, well, I've got books, but no Lamborghini. Y'all keep watching the ads. Maybe we'll get there. But why is it that Cassie feels like, oh, well, these notebooks just aren't good enough for me because they're not pretty enough? And we can't all agree. It seems like we'd all be able to agree on what a notebook is, and we could just all use the same notebook. Well, the thing is that if you ask Plato, notebooks don't really exist. The notebooks that we look at in the physical world don't really exist. Let me go ahead and explain to you Plato's theory of forms using my new tablet that I'm really excited about using in some videos. So anyway, according to Plato, and of course often stated through Socrates, now that looks really ugly, so I'm going to try again. Okay, gosh, that still looks really bad. I'm learning how to do this, okay? There is the physical world, okay? So the physical world that we live in, and that is where we see this notebook, okay? So we see this notebook, and that is the notebook we look at. Now, whether it's wide world ruled, college ruled, that sort of thing, and then we see another notebook, and we're thinking about, okay, which one of these is the best? Well, what we're really doing here is this is not real, okay? So according to Plato, this does not really exist, okay? So this is not real, and what is real here is the form of the notebook, okay, where we go to the world of the forms, which is basically the ideal, okay? So when it comes down to it, the reason why Staples has so many notebooks, so many different kinds of notebooks, is that the notebooks don't really exist. What really exists, these notebooks are reflections of the ideal notebook. So you've got one here that has got the perfect ruling. Everything is good. It's the right size. Maybe it has a little kitten on it. You know, we'll make the kitten smile a little bit, and you know, there you go. And look there, meow. Okay, so that is the ideal notebook. And so then here, what we have are reflections, okay? So we have reflections of the ideal. And so when it comes down to it, the reason why we all pick a different notebook is because we really don't know anything. We've really never seen an actual notebook. We just envision it in our minds. We envision the ideal, and what we're really doing is we're going through and we're looking at every notebook and we're comparing it to the ideal notebook. So the notebooks at Cassie's school, the school thinks, okay, the ideal notebook, it has utility about it. But for someone else, the ideal notebook is also a pretty notebook, and maybe the aesthetics take precedence over the practicality. And when it comes down to it, none of us really know anything about notebooks, and that's why Socrates said, I know nothing, because really, I've never seen the actual notebook. All I've ever seen are reflections. I hope you have a good year, Cassie. I hope that Mr. Lico's students have a good year. Maybe one day I'll get on the Lamborghini lot and I can do a much cooler video. But for right now, I just wanted to try out my tablet and, you know, show that off. And, you know, hopefully I'll use that in some more videos. Let me know what y'all think. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, all of that good stuff. And I'll be back with some more videos very soon. It's always a pleasure.
All right, so that right there was Matt Damon. I mean, sorry, Tom Ritchie. Excuse me. All right, That might get you a little bit more information about understanding the theory of forms and maybe even understanding the allegory of the cave a little bit better. But here we go. We're going to the next one. It's Is Reality Real? Plato's Allegory of the Cave, Theory of Forms Explained by Northern Diaries Digital Media. This one's 15 minutes and 17 seconds long, so it's going to be a little bit.
For a significant part of my life, I've always had this looming feeling that something is just not right. Something feels a bit out of place. It's just a slight discomfort, but a consistent one. Even when everything is seemingly fine and life is just unfolding without any major twists or turns, I still feel that sense of unease. There are moments where I'm completely distracted, when I'm swimming on a sunny day or watching a great film or dealing with survival problems, but those distractions are few and far between. I cannot pinpoint this feeling, for it is abstract in nature. But I think I remember when it began. This was many years ago. I was a little kid holding an adult's hand. I don't remember who it was. I was walking in the midst of a barren field in the middle of the night. The silhouette of a distant forest surrounded the field. I looked up to see the clear sky, so full of stars. That's what I remember the most about that night. The moon was white and perfectly round, seemed like it was just hanging without any support. That was the moment. I thought that whole scenery could not be real. The silhouettes, the moon in suspension, the moonlit field, everything felt unreal. To this day, I cannot shake that feeling. The abstract, surreal feeling of something being out of place. As I grew up and carefully observed my reality, not just a natural phenomenon, but also the world at large, with its various cultures, wars, conditionings, and recurring archetypes, the feeling of discomfort only grew deeper. No matter where I went, I couldn't find my home. There were times where I felt like there was an invisible boot on my neck, preventing me from getting up or even moving my head, but asking me to appreciate my place in my reality. The more I tried to be free, the tighter the boot's grip on my neck became. But I was reluctant in letting people know about my innermost feelings, especially about the boot's grip, as I thought it would definitely be mistaken as depression. But my reluctance went out of the window once I came across Plato's Allegory of the Cave. The Allegory of the Cave was presented by the Greek philosopher Plato in his work Republic. It is written as a dialogue between Plato's brother Glaucon and his mentor Socrates. Socrates asks Glaucon to imagine a cave. In a dark corner of the cave, there is a group of prisoners, their heads and necks chained, forcing them to look only at the wall in front of them. They've been in that state since their birth. Their only source of light is a fire, flickering and burning behind them. Occasionally, people would pass by the fire carrying various objects and pets. Their footsteps, voices, and sounds echoed throughout the cave, and their shadows cast on the wall that the prisoners were forced to look at. The prisoners only ever knew the shadows and the wall, for they can't even turn their heads. With time, the prisoners named and classified the shadows, calling a dog's shadow a dog, and a book's shadow a book, believing that they actually perceived the real objects. They sometimes held competitions among themselves and awarded honor and respect to whoever predicts the next shadow. One day, a prisoner is freed from the group. He's dragged out of the cave and towards the sunlight. He's brought out for the very first time. He experiences an immeasurable pain as he encounters the sun and brightness for the very first time. Gradually, his eyes adjust. At first, he begins to see the shadows of things, and then he begins to see the things themselves. He's then told that the things were actually real and the shadows were just mere illusions. He refuses to believe it as the shadows appear much clearer to him. Everything overwhelms him, and he is now desperate to return to the cave, as the cave was all he ever knew. But slowly he accepts his new reality. He enjoys the green field and the colors of his world. He looks up at the night sky and marvels at the stars and the moon, and one day he even looks directly at the sun. the source of everything he has seen. The sun also reminds him of his days in the dark cave and his fellow prisoners. He thinks of their competitions and their rituals of honor, and how he no longer feels connected to their world. He feels sorry for them, and so he returns to the cave to share information about his new world. As he is no longer used to the darkness of the cave, he has a hard time navigating and seeing the shadows on the wall. The other prisoners think that his journey outside has made him weak and blind. As he tries to free them, they violently resist, even going as far as killing the person trying to free them. This allegory can be interpreted in many ways, and over the years it has been. It has epistemological, political, and metaphysical connotations to it. When you examine it closely, you realize that it is incredibly structured and layered. The cave represents our everyday reality. Our whole life we consider what's being projected in front of us as the absolute truth. We constantly and mindlessly conform to what society dictates, never stopping to examine the reasons behind the events and just believing that the shadows are real. We never stop to consider the fact that the shadows can be manipulated, altered, and presented. We don't realize we are imprisoned either, as we are born into this bondage. The chains that hold us are comfortable, as that's all we know. We simply forget to examine our state, as we are mesmerized by the shadows and we are lost in them. But we are capable of seeking and seeing the truth, no matter how difficult the task is. By the very nature of our mind, we possess the ability to transcend. We possess the ability to be aware of ourselves, our journey, and to comprehend the illusions around us. The journey beyond our comfortable everyday existence can be daunting and scary. When one comes face to face with the reality for what it is, an illusion, it can be extraordinarily painful, like the prisoner's first time encounter with the light. Truth always hurts. But what does seeing the truth actually mean? We live in a material world of constant change and impermanence. In our reality, it is almost impossible to find true, eternal, and absolute knowledge. Seasons change, mighty buildings crumble, great civilizations come to an end, people and all living things die. Even our present constantly deceives us. Our sensory perceptions also let us down from time to time. What looks to be an oasis in the desert would turn out to be a mirage. The sweet taste would gradually turn into sourness. It seems that nothing is absolute in our reality. But Plato claims that behind this world of unreliable, deceiving appearances lies a world that's permanent, absolute, and reliable. He calls it the world of forms or ideas. He argues that forms, even when they are non-physical, represent the most accurate reality. He believed that forms are the only object of study which can provide true knowledge. Now, imagine a triangle. What you are imagining is the form or the idea that Plato describes, the perfect version of a triangle. Now, when you draw it with a pencil, it wouldn't be the perfect triangle because it is just an imitation of the form that was in your mind. The perfect and the unchanging state of the triangle is its form, and the imperfect representation is what you draw. How good your drawing will be depends on your ability to recognize the form. Plato says that the forms exist in an abstract state in their own realm, independent of the minds that conceive it, in a spiritual reality, if you will. No one has ever seen a perfect triangle, but the very fact that we can conceive the perfect idea or form of a triangle means that the idea of triangle must exist. Forms are not just limited to geometry. According to Plato, for every single thing that you're witnessing in your reality, for every conceivable thing, there lies a corresponding perfect example of that form. Woman, man, tree, cloud, computer, ship, dog, basket, door, house. It can be anything in your reality. All of these are examples of independently existing abstract and perfect ideas. So whatever we see in our everyday reality is equivalent of the shadows that the prisoners see in the cave, mere illusions. Plato puts the forms in the highest level of our reality. He splits our reality into two categories, the visible world and the intelligible world. The visible world is the world that is seen but cannot be thought. It is our everyday existence, the one we unquestioningly consume. He describes this in his analogy of the divided line. Imagine a straight line. The line is divided into 4 parts: A to B, B to C, C to D, and D to E. Here the first 2 parts, the AB and BC, is assigned to the visible world. AB is where the shadows and the reflections of our physical bodies sit. BC is where the actual physical things themselves sit in this category. So the first half of this line is devoted to our visible world, what we experience every single day. But Plato says that there is a world beyond what we experience every day, which is represented by the next half. The part CD is the lowest of the intelligible world, where the mathematical reasoning lies. This is the part where the abstract mathematical objects such as geometric lines and numbers are discussed, where we assume hypotheses and move towards a final conclusion. These objects lie outside of the physical world. Even the abstract mathematical reasoning of the intelligible world is less important to Plato. So his highest place in the reality, the part DE, even transcends the reasoning and soar higher than all of the hypotheses. Plato calls this stage the form of the good. It is the ultimate object of knowledge. It is not only important for a philosopher to understand these ideas or forms, but also recognize the relation between all the 4 levels. Similar to the sun in our visible reality, which is what allows us to see everything, the form of the good in the intelligible world forms the basis of understanding all other forms. It is what gives truth to the things known and the power to know to the knower. It is not only the cause of knowledge and truth, it is also the object of knowledge. But once a philosopher witnesses the true reality and its unchanging absolute nature, it's also his duty to return to the cave, the reality of illusions, to educate his fellow prisoners and try to set them free, no matter how much they violently resist. It is very important to note here that Socrates was sentenced to death because of the threat he imposed on Athenian democracy. He taught youngsters of Athens the method of intellectual inquiry. In other words, his death was a result of his attempts to lead people out of the cave. Plato also takes the opportunity to use the allegory of the cave to make a political statement. He says the people who have the ability to step out of the cave, no matter how painful the journey is, and look directly at the sun, the true reality, are the only ones that should be able to rule. Plato explains that only philosophers have the ability to conceive and understand the forms, so the ideal ruler of people should be philosopher kings. Only when such a person comes to power, the citizens of the state would have the opportunity to step out of the cave and see the light. When I first heard about the allegory of the cave and the theory of forms, I almost cried. I so clearly identified with the prisoners, as the boot on my neck and the chains on the prisoner's neck felt eerily similar. My experience with this world has always been consistently surreal, and as a result, I've never felt at home anywhere. The strange part is, I realize this imprisonment. I identify myself as the prisoner. But sometimes I also feel as if the chains that once held me captive are no longer there. I am free to leave the cave anytime I want, but I'm choosing to stay in the prison and continuing to look at the shadows. Probably because no matter how dysfunctional the shadows are, they are also familiar. I feel like I am not exiting the cave as I am scared, even to slightly turn my head and look behind. This was one of the most challenging.
I thought that was very well done. This person put a lot of time and effort into it. And so if you get a chance, go ahead, Northern Diaries Digital Media. Very good. The reason I like to show a lot of different ones is because you might be, or maybe even me, might be influenced by one channel or another based on views or subscribers, based on what you might think as someone being more elite or more wise, however you want to dictate it. Therefore, this next one is Stefan Molyneux. He's got like 859,000 subs. I've actually never heard of him. And this next one is going to be 3.8 million. And this next one after that is going to be 8.2 million. As you notice, it goes higher. But I like to start with those with the lower ones before we get to the higher ones, and you can understand the differences between them and what they may be trying to say. So anyways, without further ado, these next three are what I'll be showing next. More mainstream.
Hi everybody, Stefan Molyneux. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to your daily argument. Going to do a little bit of a sub-series here. I'm going to look at the ideas of great philosophers and a few rebuttals. And we're going to start with the big one, baby. The big, giant, monster Death Star idea. Plato's theory of forms. This, you've probably never heard of it. If you have, boy, you're going to be enlightened today. But wow, it is everywhere. It permeates. It is like the carbonation in your mental pop. It is everywhere. It's kind of like the Force in Star Wars, but with a little bit of additional mysticism, collectivism, and totalitarianism thrown into the mix. And if you've ever been around kids or raised kids, it's an amazing thing. Like, say to a toddler, that's a table. Say it to them 2, 3, 4 times, and boom, they are locked and loaded. They are ready to laser-like say to precision point out what a table is and know what a table is for the rest of their natural-born life. That is an amazing thing when you think about it. And we can see and identify a table in a doll's house, even though it would never be used for human consumption. We can see a low Japanese table and say, ah, that's a table. It's a table. We know. We know what it's an amazing thing that we're able to do. And philosophy and philosophers have been trying to figure out this for thousands of years. It was actually, I think, the very first video that I did, like 10 plus years ago. Somebody just the other day put a comment on that. First. Pretty funny. So Plato's answer to this was really interesting, because he said the way that we know what a table is before we're born. I know it sounds kind of weird, but stay with it. He said before we're born, we're floating in this otherworldly dimension, this ether, this super sensual or suprasensual environment, this alternate dimension. And we're floating, our soul is floating around, and we see a succession of perfect things, and we absorb their nature. We see a perfect table. We see a perfect ball, a perfect triangle, a perfect circle. Absolutely perfect. Unconstrained by any material concerns. You know, like you take a pencil and you draw a circle. If you zoom in, it's all, you know, blurry and ragged and so on. And what is a straight line? You draw it. I mean, you paint it. It's always good. But you see in the realm beyond the senses before you're born, absolutely perfect everything. And then when you get to Earth, you have this dim unconscious memory of the perfection of things around you, and you're able to identify a table because you have this memory of this perfect table in your mind that you saw before you were born. And he says, of course, and I've done this allegory of the cave on the show, the purpose is to stop looking at things themselves and start looking at the ideal behind them. Discard the material and go for the perfect. And of course, there's religion involved in this, there's godhood involved in this, but that is answer to the question of how we get such amazing, accurate concepts. And he said that this applied not just to physical objects, but to mental constructs or concepts like honor and dignity and so on, and virtue, and courage and so on. And we see these perfect things, not just physical things, but also philosophical ideals, emotional states, you name it. It's an amazing idea. It's a very powerful idea, because we all know in human society there is a division, because there's things that we can, tangibly see with our senses. We can see, touch, taste, smell. And then there are things that we can't see that are actually usually more important to us in terms of how our lives are organized. You can't see the nation. You can't see the state. You can see buildings and guys with guns and people, banging gavels and so on, but you can't see the state. God does not respond to direct sense perception. The will of the majority, again, we can't see it. You see, we're bound up. We live in a chamber or a prison or a world of concepts. Concepts organize us and run us, not individuals. And that is a very when you really get that, how much of your mind is conditioned to obey concepts. It's really fascinating. Now, of course, concepts don't speak for themselves. The will of the majority doesn't speak for itself, so you need eloquent, often sophists to get up there and speak for the will of the majority, and so on. And the democracy is not walking up to your door, knocking on it and saying, here's what I think the collective should do. And so you need, again, usually sophists, politicians, and so on, to go and inform the crowd, whip up the crowd, often provoke resentments within the crowd, and then claim to speak for the crowd, and so on. So concepts can't speak for themselves. But if you can portray yourself to the mob as someone who speaks for the general good, or a particular god, or the will of the people, or the destiny of the nation, or whatever it is, if you can be someone who credibly claims to speak for that, then people will obey you, because they don't think they're obeying an individual. They think they're surrendering to a concept, and our minds run so much on concepts that we feel much more comfortable obeying a concept than we do obeying an individual. So that's Plato's theory of the forms in a few minutes. Now, there have been a lot of complicated rebuttals to this question, to this idea. Now, remember, of course, Plato was writing before, I mean, there was Democritus, there was ideas, Lucretius, there are ideas of atoms and so on, but they hadn't been sort of established in the modern context. And I think we have concepts because there are atoms, like our highest abstractions respond to the basic nature of matter and reality. And atoms plus purpose, well, that's a very different thing, and that's where our accuracy comes from. But the rebuttals to Plato's forms it's been quite a cottage industry in philosophy. Aristotle was very negative towards them. He was more of an empiricist. He says, look, we see a whole bunch of tables, we understand their purpose, we have 4 legs and a top, a flat top, it doesn't matter what they're used for. The difference between a table and a desk could be drawers, like we understand what things are through repeated exposure and the abstraction of matter and purpose, in particular for human forms, or matter without purpose in the form of trees, without human purpose. The tree has a purpose, but it's not a human purpose. So he said we accumulate a bunch of experiences and we abstract from that. Now that's fascinating, because if you have an ideal abstraction that is bigger and greater than individual manifestations of that abstraction, in other words, if you have a concept of chair that's bigger than each individual chair, then you can have a concept that's different from each individual instance. Now, that doesn't sound that important with regards to chairs, but if you have something like that old Star Trek goofy line, everyone thinks it's philosophy, it's not, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one or the few. Well, there's no such thing as the needs of the many, right? And there's no way to define the needs of the many. If you could, then central planning and communism would work. And so, what are the needs of the many? It's a concept that you're supposed to surrender to. That's supposed to be bigger than your own individual needs. And someone is going to claim to speak for the needs of the many, the will of the good, the will of the collective, or whatever it is, and it's going to be a disaster because they can't possibly define these things. And even if they could go around and interview someone, their needs may be manipulative. I need $1 million, whatever it is. And so Aristotle pushed back hard against this, because if you say all of our concepts are derived from each specific instance, then if there's a contradiction between each specific instance and the concept has to be adapted to the specific instance, right? If I say, well, there's a possibility that a chair could be on fire and burnt down to a crisp and ashes and still be a chair, we'd have to say, well, no, because it doesn't have 4 legs, you can't sit in it, and so on. And so if you have a concept that contradicts the characteristics of any individual entity, then your concept is invalid. Like if you have a scientific theory that is contradicted by experimental evidence, empirical evidence, your scientific theory is invalid. Now there's another one as well, which is to say, okay, let's say there's an ideal, a perfect form of the good. Well, what does that even mean? What is the good? The good in terms of what is virtue? Let's look at courage. What is the ideal form of courage? I don't know. It is an excess of courage is called, by Aristotle, an excess of courage is called foolhardiness, rushing into battle when you're not armed and so on. Very courageous, but very self-destructive. A deficiency of courage is called cowardice, where you could win, but you don't fight anyway because you're just scared and you surrender to your fear. Fear can be healthy, fear can be destructive. So what is the ideal for courage if it can include both running towards an enemy and running away from an enemy, depending on your relative strengths and capabilities of victory? So what does that mean? What does it mean to have courage? We understand that a deficiency of love is cold-heartedness, an excess of love could be, obsession and stalking and so on, an excess of attachment. What does that mean? An excess of honesty can be destructive to you and your relationships. A deficiency of honesty can also, what is the ideal for honesty if it can include withholding information and sharing information? So these are very fascinating and interesting questions, and I come down more on the Aristotelian side, as I've talked about before, but I hope this stimulates some thought in you. These are ideas well worth pursuing. Stefan Molyneux, Free Domain Radio. Thank you so much for watching.
Ooh, looks like there's a good one that was next. I may have to go ahead and revisit that. Anyways, next. Oh, sorry. Again, that was Stefan Molyneux. Plato's Theory of Forms in 10 minutes. Breaks it down easily. There's going to be another 6.5 minute one, more mainstream one, and it's going to go definitely more mainstream, crash course, history of science. This is Plato and Aristotle. It may not necessarily go through the same things. But again, here we go.
Athens, 2,400 years ago. It's a compact place. Only about 250,000 people live here. There are fine baths, theatres, temples, shopping arcades and gymnasiums. It's warm for more than half the year. This is also home to the world's first true and probably greatest philosopher, Plato. Born into a prominent and wealthy family in the city, Plato devoted his life to one goal, helping people to reach a state of what he termed eudaimonia, or fulfillment. Plato is often confused with Socrates. Socrates was an older friend who taught Plato a lot but didn't write any books. Plato wrote lots of them, 36, all dialogues, beautifully crafted scripts of imaginary discussions in which Socrates is always allotted a starring role, among them the Republic, the Symposium, the Laws, the Meno, and the Apology. Plato had 4 big ideas for making life more fulfilled. First big idea, think more. We rarely give ourselves time to think carefully and logically about our lives and how to lead them. Sometimes we just go along with what the Greeks called doxa, or popular opinions. In the 36 books he wrote, Plato showed this common sense to be riddled with errors, prejudice, and superstition. Fame is great, follow your heart, money is the key to a good life. The problem is, popular opinions edge us towards the wrong values, careers, and relationships. Plato's answer is, know yourself. It means doing a special kind of therapy, philosophy, subjecting your ideas to examination rather than acting on impulse. If you strengthen your self-knowledge, you don't get so pulled around by feelings. Plato compared the role of our feelings to being dragged dangerously along by a group of wild horses. In honour of his mentor and friend Socrates, this kind of examination is called a Socratic discussion. You can have it with yourself or, ideally, with another person who isn't trying to catch you out, but wants to help you clarify your own ideas. Second big idea, let your lover change you. That sounds weird if you think that love means finding someone who wants you just the way you are. In the Symposium, Plato's play about a dinner party where a group of friends drink too much and get talking about love, sex and relationships, Plato says, true love is admiration. In other words, the person you need to get together with should have very good qualities, which you yourself lack. Let's say they should be really brave or organised or warm and sincere. By getting close to this person, you can become a little like they are. The right person for us helps us grow to our full potential. For Plato, in a good relationship, a couple shouldn't love each other exactly as they are right now. They should be committed to educating each other and to enduring the stormy passages this inevitably involves. Each person should want to seduce the other into becoming a better version of themselves. 3. Decode the message of beauty. Everyone pretty much likes beautiful things, but Plato was the first to ask, why do we like them? He found a fascinating reason. Beautiful objects are whispering important truths to us about the good life. We find things beautiful when we unconsciously sense in them qualities we need but are missing in our lives. Gentleness, harmony, balance, peace, strength. Beautiful objects, therefore, have a really important function. They help to educate our souls. Ugliness is a serious matter too. It parades dangerous and damaged characteristics in front of us. It makes it harder to be wise, kind, and calm. Plato sees art as therapeutic. It's the duty of poets and painters, and nowadays novelists, TV producers and designers, to help us to live good lives. 4. Reform society. Plato spent a lot of time thinking how the government and society should ideally be. He was the world's first utopian thinker. In this, he was inspired by Athens' great rival, Sparta. This was a city-sized machine for turning out great soldiers. Everything the Spartans did, how they raised their children, how their economy was organized, whom they admired, how they had sex, what they ate, was tailored to that one goal. And Sparta was hugely successful from a military point of view. But that wasn't Plato's concern. He wanted to know, how could a society get better at producing not military power, but fulfilled people? In his book, The Republic, Plato identifies a number of changes that should be made. Athenian society was very focused on the rich, like the louche aristocrat Alcibiades, and sports celebrities like the boxer Milo of Croton. Plato wasn't impressed. It really matters who we admire, because celebrities influence our outlook, ideas, and conduct, and bad heroes give glamour to flaws of character. Plato therefore wanted to give Athens new celebrities, replacing the current crop with ideally wise and good people he called guardians, models for everyone's good development. These people would be distinguished by their record of public service, their modesty and simple habits, their dislike of the limelight, and their wide and deep experience. They would be the most honoured and admired people in society. He also wanted to end democracy in Athens. He wasn't crazy. He just observed how few people think properly before they vote, and therefore we get very substandard rulers. He didn't want to replace democracy with a horrid dictatorship, but he wanted to prevent people from voting until they'd started to think rationally. That is, until they'd become philosophers. Otherwise, government would just be a kind of mob rule. To help the process, Plato started a school, the Academy, in Athens, which lasted a good 300 years. There, pupils learnt not just maths and spelling, but also how to be good and kind. His ultimate goal was that politicians should become philosophers. The world will not be right, he said, until kings become philosophers or philosophers kings.
That was more of a mainstream version. Watching some of these bigger mainstream ones, it actually gets me thinking of different facets of this. Anyways, this is by the School of Life. And our final one that I'm going to show tonight, I might show more later, who knows. It's by Crash Course, or Plato and Aristotle Crash Course History of Science number 3. Then I'll go to discussing it on my own, give my own thoughts and things like that.
Pop quiz. Are you a Platonist or an Aristotelian? An idealist or an empiricist? Do you think up neat rules to describe the universe and then try to fit data into your theory? Or do you observe the world and draw conclusions from what you see? Do you trust math or your senses? Before you decide, let's take a trip to urban Athens, circa 399 BCE. Last week, we met the pre-Socratics. Despite having by any reasonable standard invented science in Europe, these thinkers are lumped together today as simply not Socrates. So, who was this smarty pants? Socrates didn't have a single clearly formulated natural philosophy. He didn't even study nature. He studied politics and morality and prided himself on not claiming to know things. But Socrates did two important things. He asked a lot of questions, which influenced how philosophers went about teaching their ideas, and he inspired the two rock stars of classical Greek philosophy. Socrates held that knowledge comes from asking questions. So many questions. His name is attached to the Socratic method, in which you constantly ask questions so that students can steadily break down a big problem into smaller parts they can test hypotheses against. It's okay if they realize that a hypothesis is wrong. In fact, it's good. It means they're moving away from falsehood. The Socratic method is an example of negative hypothesis elimination, or proving that something is wrong to narrow down the possibilities of what might be right. But Socrates' biggest legacy may be his student, Plato, and his student Aristotle. Both were inspired by Socrates' methods, but they arrived at some very different conclusions about the world. We know a lot about Socrates thanks to his students. Chiefly, Plato founded a physical school called the Academy to train Athenians in how to think like Socrates. Plato wrote down dialogues between Socrates and other thinkers, including Parmenides. He was the Eleatic philosopher who believed that nothing really changes and thus we can't trust our senses. This had a big impact on Plato, whose best-known works include Republic, in which Socrates defines justice and argues for rule by a philosopher king instead of democracy, and Timaeus, in which Socrates talks about the nature of the universe. Plato had a big impact on thinking about thinking. Today, we still use Plato's name for a place of philosophical learning, academy, to describe the concept of higher education in general. At the original academy, Plato emphasized training in how to think properly. Over the door of the academy was inscribed the dictum, "Let no one enter here who is ignorant of geometry." Plato based his own philosophy on geometric laws. He taught a Pythagoras-inspired idealism, or a theory of nature based on perfect abstractions, rules of which real-world stuff could only ever be imperfect examples. So Plato had to fit his observations to his theory. That idealism is one of the reasons people think of Plato as more of a philosopher than a scientist. Plato built on the work of the pre-Socratic schools, but he developed a more complete way of looking at the natural world than they did. And his students took off in search of solutions, even as they changed his underlying theory. The only Greek who wrote more philosophy than Plato was Plato's own star student and rival, Aristotle. Compared to Plato's idealistic abstractions, Aristotle's philosophy makes more common sense. His ideas are based on empirical evidence. He observed the world and then came up with a theory that explained it. This order of operations is at the heart of modern scientific practices. Aristotle was from Macedonia in the north of Greece, but he studied at Plato's Academy in Athens for 20 years until Plato died. Afterward, Aristotle took a lucrative gig. King Philip II of Macedonia hired him as tutor to his son, Alexander. And you know this particular Alexander, he decided to conquer the entire Earth. Before age 30, he ruthlessly conquered much of Asia, Africa, and Europe, ruling over more area than anybody until Genghis Khan. Aristotle's influence on Alexander the Great reminds us that science is always social. From the very beginning, scientists have served bad, heartless dudes. Aristotle, a man who literally wrote the book Ethics, pushed his most famous pupil to invade Persia, kill barbarians, and become a brutal warlord. After Alexander died young, Aristotle went back to Athens to start his own school, the Lyceum. The Lyceum was pretty different from Plato's Academy. Because Aristotle liked plants and liked to walk and talk, his school wasn't in a building, but a grove of trees outside the city. And his school was called the Peripatetic, meaning walky, and thus informal, not like the Academy. It was during the Lyceum years that Aristotle probably wrote many of his most famous works, including Metaphysics, On the Heavens, On the Soul, which is actually an amazing book of proto-biology meets psychology, and his school's highly influential set of textbooks on natural philosophy called Physics. How did Aristotle answer our big questions about physics, such as what was stuff and where are we? He posited a complete system joining the elements and the heavens. This became the basis for European thought about the physical world for 2,000 years. Let's compare Aristotle's system to his mentor Plato's in this episode's Thought Bubble. For Plato, the cosmos was perfect. It had perfect rules that could be studied, and all cosmic stuff was made up of atoms that were perfectly geometric, platonic solids, each creating one element. Tetrahedrons of fire, cubes of earth, octahedrons of air, icosahedrons of water, and dodecahedrons as the shape of the whole universe, like a giant celestial set of D&D dice. Plato's theory of the heavens stated that the wandering stars, that is the planets, followed a path of uniform circular motion. You see, the wandering stars must move in perfect circles since the cosmos is orderly. But this one is moving backwards. Plato's students could see that Mars, for one, seemed to jump backwards, showing retrograde motion. Plato didn't really have an explanation. European astronomers would spend the next 2,000 years meticulously trying to solve this problem, and they would end up learning a lot in the process. How did Aristotle build on Plato's system? Aristotle's cosmology was abstract too, but he attempted to make sense of observations about the world. He crossed those same four elements, plus a new anti-void called the ether, with four physical sensations: hot and cold, dry and wet, and used these to explain everything. Earth was the heaviest element, so it was the center of the cosmos. Water was lighter than Earth, so oceans rested on top of the Earth. So far, so good. Air's natural state is above water. That also checks out. Fire is on top of air, which is a little weird, but it does go up, I guess. And way out past these four terrestrial spheres, out past the moon, spun the stars, acting according to their nature as ethereal or perfect circle-moving objects. And nowhere, anywhere in this theory was a void. Nature abhors a vacuum. In Aristotle's cosmos, all of the elements were actively trying to get back to their natural states. Why did flames rise? They were just trying to get back to the fiery celestial realm above the air. Thanks, Thought Bubble. From the pre-Socratics to Plato to Aristotle, we've ended up with a bunch of spheres inside spheres, each with a natural tendency. This confirmed the average Bronze Age farmer's experience, and ours. The Earth seems to stand still, water sits on Earth, air isn't very heavy. Aristotle recognized that elements didn't always exist in their pure forms. A tree, for example, was a combination of earth, water, and air. Roots go down into the earth and branches go up into the air. His theories also worked for comparisons. Why does a book fall faster than a piece of paper? Well, because it has more earth in it. Aristotle could even explain natural phenomenon. Why does rain fall from the sky to the ground? Why do volcanoes shoot fire up? Obviously, this isn't how I think gravity works, but it's a way of explaining it that made sense to the ancient Greeks. Where Plato saw a world of ideal shapes, Aristotle had a theory that acknowledged that we're all kind of a hot mess. Things are naturally jumbled up, but always trying to get back to their essential place. Aristotle also loved looking at living things, and he looked closely. He noticed, for example, that the octopus can change color, which is awesome, and that male octopi have a special arm called a hectocotylus, which is something you should Google, because it's weird and kind of awesome, and it wasn't confirmed by scientists until the 1800s. Aristotle trusted that knowledge proceeded from the experience of the senses. In his works, such as History of Animals, among others, he wrote down observations like these about all kinds of organisms. He also tried to classify the world into an orderly system, giving rise to taxonomy. When he attempted to answer one of our questions, what is life, the taxonomy he created relied on a system of souls. Plants have a vegetative soul responsible for reproduction and growth. Animals have a vegetative and a sensitive or animal soul responsible for mobility and sensation. And humans, and only humans, have a vegetative, a sensitive, and a rational soul, capable of thought and reflection. This led Aristotle to further theorize that all things can be placed on a line from simplest/least soulful to highest/most soulful. On one end, he placed plants, then worms, and so on. These low animals bore their offspring cold, dry, and in thick eggs. The higher animals made warm and wet babies. So of course, at the other end of the line, Aristotle placed men, meaning not humans, but dudes. According to him, cold maternal blood produced inferior humans, girls, while hot paternal semen produced boys. Aristotle was maybe not someone we would want to elect as our philosopher king today, but Aristotle's system of classification again seemed to confirm his classical and medieval readers' daily experiences. His proto-biological ideas stuck around in various forms until Darwin, getting lumped under the heading of the Great Chain of Being, that all creatures on Earth stand somewhere on a ladder of perfection up toward God. You may have already guessed that this concept has been particularly troublesome when it comes to scientific racism, but that's a story for later. The creepier effects of some of his ideas aside, Aristotle had an answer for everything. For the most part, these ideas were based in observation and conformed to his common sense. His answers were able to explain how the world worked, most of the time. Not only did Aristotle come up with a complete theory of everything, he wrote it down. He was a prolific author, and a significant percentage of his texts have survived thanks to our Arabian scholars. Then again, Plato's transcendental ideas about the cosmos, even if wrong in their particulars, inspired centuries of scholars to think about the universe as having underlying laws, ones that hold regardless of what our senses can show us. So are you a Platonist or an Aristotelian? Or, taking a page from Socrates, is that a trick question? Next time, we'll follow Alexander the Maybe Not So Great into India to witness the rise of the Maurya dynasty, set the Earth spinning on its axis, and found a science of life. Crash Course History of Science is filmed in the Dr. Cheryl C. Kinney studio in Missoula, Montana, and it's made with the help of all these nice people, and our animation team is Thought Cafe. Crash Course is a Complexly production. If you want to keep a
Alright, that is Crash Course. If you want to subscribe to that, I think that YouTube stopped streaming because of all the copyright content. Someone joined. It looks like it's Titus. Sorry, Titus. I didn't want to join anyone joining until that was all done. At any rate, what I'm going to do is going to continue a little bit. And you can join in anytime, Titus. I can't hear you if you want to test your audio. I mean your mic. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about is the entire thing. It's like when we look at nature, right? Where can we find? We can see lines. They're not entirely straight. So here I am. I'm drawing a line. It's not very straight, is it? Not really. Now, that was actually a pretty straight line that I drew. But if you look at this, which one is straighter line? This one's a straighter line. And let's see, which one can we get a straightest line? It would be that. But how do we find in nature, if there's never been a straight line ever created, how do we think about creating it when we've never seen it before? For example, if we get a stick, it's like, all right, can we find a straighter stick? And someone goes out and finds a straighter stick. And then someone else goes, well, what can we find the straightest stick? It's like, how do we even measure that? How I think about it is, how do we get the straightest line ever that we imagine it's not in nature and we create it? My thought would be, okay, we get something that's long and thin, a piece of string, however you can get a string, any type of rope, but breaking it down, just the thinnest strand of whatever, heck, your hair, right? Your hair could be curly. All you do is you pull until it's as straight as possible, and there you go. It might be a little bit wavery, but that's as straight as you can get. And then once you have written utensils, you can go and straighten out and draw a line. That can be a straightest drawn line. Now, suppose you go, well, what happens if you put two lines together? It's like, what happens when there's two lines? Two straight lines. Well, what do you get? You get an angle. Right? It's not, it doesn't, no matter how you do it, you get an angle, right? Now, now I'm going a little bit ahead of myself. I just want to kind of show this. I can't get it. All right, so you can picture in your mind a triangle, or you can picture in your mind two lines. I mean, that looks like an L, but any two lines makes an angle. Of course, you can at the end. But what if you put another line within the other line at any point? It's a joined line, I guess, right? And then, of course, what happens if you put in another line with another line? You get a intersection, a cross line. Now, again, let's create a triangle in our mind, right? Say you're the first human who's ever imagined this ever, that hey, look, there's such a thing as a straight line. And then, okay, we're putting two straight lines together, and then we're gonna put in a third straight line, and we're gonna call this a triangle, right? Three angles. Well, yeah, YouTube shuts me down whenever I live stream YouTube content, but it's not like I'm trying to. Yeah, Titus is just asking me. Okay, so we get a triangle. But how in nature would we create a perfect triangle when we've never even figured out getting a straight line? Did someone think of a triangle first before they came up with the line? It kind of reminds me of the chicken and the egg, which came first, and then, but more important, more materialistic, is which came first, the can or the can opener. I always posit that we came up with a can first, and then we figured out different ways to open it, and therefore came the can opener, which was the simplest and the easiest so far. Because if you come up with a can opener first, it's like, hey, what good is this thing? It opens things called cans. It's like, well, cans haven't been made yet, so why do we even have a can opener? It doesn't make sense. Therefore, that's why I think that the can opener came first. I mean, can came first before the can opener. Seems pretty logical there. All right, so you got three angles, triangles. You know, you get crap. And of course, you got one angle, even though it's two lines. Makes me think. Is this if we do this, there you go, we've got two angles. It's not a triangle. It's like, yeah. What? The thing is, it's not complete. And you can't get a completeness, which means encapsulating type of object. With the triangle, you can. It's all enclosed, and then you get four lines, four angles. And I'm trying to create the perfect triangle or square, but I'm not going to, or rectangle, whatever. All right, so you know, it's encapsulating. It seems useful. You know, we build a lot of things with that, and then, so we've gotten lines, but in nature, is there a perfect circle? I guess you could think about the moon or sun in nature being the perfect circle that we can see. And if you're in nature, that would be one of the first things that you notice, because it's there almost every day, no matter where you are, as long as you're on the surface of the planet. So how do you draw a perfect circle? It's like there's nothing in nature that's a perfect circle except something that's up in the sky. There might be a rock that's round that appears to be a perfect circle, and maybe you could sand that, but it has to be imagined first. You have to think it first. Can I draw a circle here? Ellipse circle tool. Here we go. Yeah, and so exactly how would you draw a perfect circle? Well, that's where, I mean, this may not even be a perfect circle. It's circular. But what is the perfect circle? And when you imagine in your mind, are they equal? I mean, as far as all the curves. And of course, these would be equal. All four corners are the same curvature. But does that mean it's a perfect circle? It's very difficult. But yeah, this is, and the way you do it is by using an angle, which is a compass. Okay, when you have a compass, this measure tool, right? It just measures an angle. And so when you have a compass, you just have one straight line, you know, a straight object like a rod or a stick, and you have another straight line, and what you do is you keep them at one angle. So whatever angle it is, whether it's going to be a right angle or obtuse angle or acute angle, and you just keep that second line or rod, whatever, exactly the same size, and you keep that angle the exact same angle, and you have your centerpiece, and you draw in a circle, and there you go. You got your circle, your perfect circle. So that's how you would create one when there's never been anything like that before. So we've got, now with straight lines, we can create curvature, like perfect curvatures, perfect circles. So in order to create all this, if say you were born in the middle of nowhere, nothing, never seen TV, never seen magazine, never seen any print, never seen any man-made object, and your parents grew you up and you lived out in the woods and that's all you did, just living off of nature, nothing man-made, you would create, would you be able to create something like this? Would you be able to imagine it? That would be an interesting thought, because that would bring into mind consciousness. Did someone that was born that never had any exposure to what was created by men before men, and can they come up with it? Can they create it? Is it there? Is it accessible? That's an interesting question, and that would kind of suck. And so I don't know. I'm having a conversation with myself, and I think that's fine. Plato would have been, hey, that's good. You like having conversation with yourself. You ask your own questions, and you keep questioning. That's kind of Plato's philosophy. So this is the entire thought of consciousness existing before us, and therefore it's gonna, what's the point of us? What's the point of nature if there's such a thing as consciousness, and where there's everything and all knowing things, and everything's there, and what we perceive as humans, if you watched any of the other shows of mine, and we talk about, or I show of I lost my thought process here. Gosh, isn't that the worst, when you have a train of thought and all of a sudden it goes away? But anyway, before I go on with that, maybe I'll remember it later. Here's something that I want to kind of show you. All right, this is a picture that my daughter colored with paint, right? And, you know, this is a black and white printout, and she got to color it. Now, behind this, I've got an object. The object, no one... yeah, I know, Lurkster, sorry. So no one is going to know exactly what kind of knife. No one's going to picture exactly the knife that I hold behind here. Absolutely no one. I mean, you can guess, you might get it correct, but you can guess the color, you can guess maybe the shape, the handle, the point, but the thought that you have in your mind right now, saying that I've got a knife behind you, you have a preconceived notion of a knife. Okay, you're never gonna get the exact representation of the knife that I hold, because your imagination, there's so much variation, differences that there can be. So now I'm going to show you the knife, and it's just one of these knives. It was probably nothing like the knife that you had imagined, right? I mean, you could have guessed quite a little bit, but this is has quite a lot of curves. But at the end, well, what the purpose of a knife does is it cuts, right? Sometimes it stabs, and it has a handle where you can hold it and use it, and you won't cut yourself or you won't stab yourself. And that is pretty much a knife. That's the idea of a knife. And it came in your head first, and you know what? All those pieces of information is what you had. It may not be exactly the same thing as what this knife that I'm holding is, but you had something that probably had a point. You probably had something, not necessarily, not all knives have points. You had something that would cut an edge, and you probably had something of an idea where you handle the knife where you won't cut or stab yourself. So interesting thought right there as far as a knife. Now, when we consider where we are in civilization, in culture, we have something called mass media. That's where the masses watch media. So exactly when we talk or think about Plato, to the majority of people, they're going to have the idea of what Plato's philosophies and thoughts were based on likeliness of they were watching something of the videos where millions of people were watching. Let me bring this back up. For example, oh, not that. Excuse me. I'm still not fully out of my sickness. So, if I'm gonna talk to someone about Plato and really kind of really want to know what they know, they're most likely gonna know something about it by someone who watched something like this, like 245,000 views, than someone who has made like 11,597 views. And the differences between this video and this video is quite different. It's very vastly different. Or maybe even this one. This one has 3 million views about the philosophy of Plato. And we did get an interesting bit about philosophy of Plato here, but again, it was quite different than this person who created it and had his own thoughts and realizations about it. And so when I talk to someone, most likely in just anyone in general, is like, hey, do you know about Plato and his philosophies? And someone's like, yeah. Most likely the odds are you're gonna find someone who watched something like this. That's mass media. Okay. Someone who doesn't really investigate themselves. They could. Someone goes, hey, this is pretty interesting tidbit about Plato. Maybe I'll actually go ahead and read something about Plato. You know, maybe I'll go ahead and read, you know, The Republic. That seems to be the most well-known writing about Plato. Apology is also pretty good, that most people know about. But what about all these other ones, right? Not so much. At any rate, let's go back here. So mass media, what they're trying to get us, I think, whoever's in charge of the mass media, they're going to want to get everyone, so when you think of a knife, it's the knife that they want you to think and imagine. So for example, think of the United States flag. Everyone knows the United States flag. It's pretty simple. It's pretty symbolic. 50 stars right now. You got 7 white stripes, 7 red stripes. Hopefully I don't forget. But you've got a good representation of what the United States flag is. So imagine there ends up being just one flag of all of Earth, at least all humans would ever know, and it's just that one flag. And say it's the flag of the United States, and if no one's ever seen another flag in their lives, all they can know is that United States flag, and they're going to think of that. So that that abstract, well, in materialistic world, someone is trying to make it so it's their ideal of that representation, and it's going to be that one. Now that is total control. That is total loss of freedom, and we don't want that. No one wants to have one knife, even though everyone loves the thought of one knife to be the perfect ideal knife. We don't have that. All these variations of knives have different uses, and better uses than others. Try imagine if you're going to cut vegetables with a butcher knife, or you know, skin an animal with a butcher knife. It's just not going to be the same as what butchering is. It's just chopping up big pieces of meat. So having that one idea of just that perfect one knife isn't a good thing, and I think that's something that Plato recognized, and excuse me, some people recognize, but the majority don't. They same thing with what is the most beautiful person in the world. Guess who tries to get that to happen? Someone like Beauty Magazine or Cosmopolitan or Time, or the greatest person of the year type of thing. It's getting that ideal. It's just not good. So we're starting to get to that point where it's trying to get to that singularity that everyone talks about, where every abstract notion, thought, idea is boiled down to one. So we have 7 billion people, 7 billion people agree on that one thing being exactly that one thing and nothing else. It's not good. It's something that we don't want to get to, and that's why individual thought, individual freedom is necessary, and it takes these individual thoughts to make everything gets that creative juices flowing. It gets that creativeness of things that are going around in the world. I mean, imagine people stopped. So Bill Gates just said, hey, Windows 10 is the perfect Windows operating system. It can't ever get better, so therefore there will never be any more Windows versions out there. People will go, that's horrible. That's like the worst thinking in the world. And his argument is, well, it's going to be as perfect as it can be, and it's going to be better than any of the other operating systems, because what we're going to do is we're going to shut down the other operating systems. So there's going to be one operating system, and it's Windows 10, and it's forever. And they'll just rename it Windows forever. And they'll just make operating system. When you think of operating system, you think of Linux, you think of iOS, a couple of little ones. But it's gotten to be, what, 3 main ones nowadays? A couple of variations. A monopoly, we see that. A monopoly on thought. We don't want that. We like these options because these options get perfected. These differences make things a little bit better. When people have, I mean, anything that you do, for me, it's fishing, and now it's kind of, I've been looking at a lot of different types of guns. I mean, no one could tell me the one size fits all overall best fishing rod. No one can tell me the overall best type of gun and caliber of ammunition. They all each are different, and they all have particular cons and pros and cons. And so it's not like we can get one gun and it fits all our needs. It's not like we can get one fishing rod and it fits all our needs. Imagine fishing for a tiny little crappie using a 15-foot huge fishing pole, and maybe a fishing line that's like 110 pounds just for like 2-pound crappie maybe, or something like that. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't suit the needs very well. So whoever thinks that the one idea is the best idea, and therefore it should always, everyone in the world, everyone in the universe should be thinking that as the standard, I will disagree on many merits. So when we think about that ever coming to fruition, it seems to be, in my opinion, maybe it's in your opinion too, that we're heading there slowly. Maybe it's accelerating a little bit faster, that, hey, you shouldn't think that way, you shouldn't talk that way, you shouldn't dress this way, you shouldn't look this way, you should be like this, you should say things like this, you should do whatever. And when it's someone within a minority of a group saying that, it's going to be easily ignored, because what can one or a few people do? They're not going to really do anything unless they're really hell-bent on making your life difficult. But you do something that's different to the masses, and this again gets towards things that occur with Socrates and Plato. When you get towards the masses, whether they're just ignorant or stubborn, they will say, hey, you're doing wrong. It's like, I'm doing wrong? I just have my own thoughts. I have my own opinions. What's wrong about that? It's like, look, it's not conforming to the thoughts and of the masses, and that's what counts, you know. It's like, no, that I disagree. I mean, everyone in the world but one person could think something and have an opinion or a belief, and it could be totally wrong. That doesn't make it right. And it could be that no one, or just the one person in the world, has the correct truth to it, and it doesn't matter if everyone disbelieves it, it's still true. Those are just powerful words, powerful quote by, I don't know who it is, but that quote comes to me. I don't like to talk too much, and I've got quite a fever going. I thought I was getting better. Let's see if there's anyone else who would want to join in on the conversation. And no, it's not. Okay. So now we get into consciousness. We're kind of going back into it. And a lot of people, excuse me, a lot of research is getting into, especially scientific research, the focused collective consciousness of whatever it is, the thought of feelings, can generate material or direction, I guess you could say material direction. Maybe that's the way to get towards. And that's an interesting thought. What happens when one people or few people don't go along with it? Does that put a does that ruin it? Does that create a potential defect, deformity? I mean, just think of all the things that come with form: conformity, deformity, forms. The theory of forms, that word form is pretty powerful. Formula, man, that is a powerful word if you think about it. Because first thing, that in order for anything to be created, it has to be formed first. But where is that formation coming from? It's coming from our mind. Do we think other animals besides humans think of forms? I don't think so. A lot of animals in nature don't really create anything. We see humans create things. We know animals can use tools, so we know that they have the ability to create a form of function, but that can be different than a form of creativity. Humans, at the least, have a form of creativity as far as creating, not necessarily form of use. That's another kind of cool thought. Now, back to consciousness again, and I keep segueing, and I'm sorry, okay, now I kind of remember what I was going towards. That something that I forgot like probably 10-15 minutes ago. We have the formulation of words. I mean, all it is just vibrations going through the air just to start my vocal cords, and the way that it's formed. You can understand it if you understand English, the way that I'm forming it into a particular way. You probably won't understand me if you're Chinese or Korean or Mexican, I don't know, and you know just only that language. But consciousness, on the other hand, when you get into the realm of what I guess Plato would call ether, when you're in that form of consciousness, it doesn't matter what language it is. You're tapped into a resource where you understand that idea, and then it finds whatever way to translate into a way that you can understand it, whether it's through a breakdown of words that you understand, or breakdown of pictures, or thoughts, or just way of explaining it through nature of what's going on. And it's just a weird thing. If you've never been in that state where you can experience consciousness, whether it's near-death experience or ayahuasca or maybe even mushrooms on a different hand. Look, we've got 4 kingdoms, different kingdoms: animal kingdom, plant kingdom, I can't remember the others, you know, like microbial kingdom. There's the mushroom kingdom. I don't know the exact Latin term for it. We know nothing at all about it. Even the plant kingdom, there's still a lot of plants out there that we know nothing about. And we share in our kingdom, our animal kingdom, with it. We can't live without the plant kingdom. I wonder if we could live without the other kingdoms. We know we're full of microbials. We definitely can't live without them. So can we not live without mushrooms? The mushroom kingdom? Why is it a kingdom in the first place? What about the other kingdom? Makes you think a little bit. So maybe that serves a purpose, and we've just neglected that purpose. We've neglected understanding the purpose of mushrooms, the mushroom family, whatever. I mean, we love to eat it. Some of us like to eat it based on the effects that it gives. I've actually never tried magic mushrooms. I'm not sure if I ever would. We'll see. I just love the taste of mushrooms. Certain mushrooms. Some mushrooms I'm not too fond of. Not at all. Mushrooms on the pizza? Not that much. The mushrooms that the Chinese food has? No, not so much. Other mushrooms... I segue a lot, don't I? Sorry. Okay. So, those who've experienced consciousness, whichever form that you have, whichever form of consciousness that you've experienced, whether it's outer, external, from your first or third person view, or whatever. I've never experienced that part. I've experienced the more like a third person view. It's a weird thought. It's like, imagine if you were yourself, allowed someone to control your body and your movements, you know, just kind of like not necessarily like a puppet, just kind of like picking you up and going, let's go that way, and since you're connected to your body, you just kind of go, and your body's just kind of not sure how to go because someone else is just kind of making you go a certain direction, like walking or whatever, and so you're kind of stumbling and whatnot. But once you get going, you go, oh, okay, this person's going. I figure it's like having someone next to you in the driver's seat who can control the car with you or override it, and you allow them to, and then they'll just say, okay, here it is again, and you take control over it. That's what it feels like. And that transition's never smooth at the beginning, but once that transition happens, it's fine. You go along with it. That's what it feels like. If no one's ever had that experience, that's what it feels like. And then you get to learn. You're guided. You're just trying to understand what it is that you're in, with whatever experience that you're in, and exist within it, not just be a non-moving observer, right? It's not like you're just kind of there and everything in the world happens around you. You're there, you're part of the experience. You get to move and go wherever you want to go. And it's unlike you have a measure of control. It's not like when you're in a dream where you can't really control what happens. You're just there to observe what's happening, and it happens, and your mind absorbs it. So consciousness is quite different. And whether we have that ability to tap into that consciousness and material and bring forth that idea in that ether consciousness realm and apply it to the materialistic realm of where things are here, and whether we as material beings can affect that consciousness I don't think we can. I think we can reflect the consciousness back into the material, because I don't know. Just like, look, I don't know. I think Socrates and Plato would say, I don't know. At this point, all we care about is finding someone who knows more, because we don't really want to talk to someone who knows less or knows nothing about it. It's as if I was going to go, hey, talk to someone who's smarter than you. Maybe you'll understand it. It's like, okay, who's smarter than me? How do I know? And that kind of brings me back to the story of Socrates in the Apology. So here we go. I'm going to kind of make it a little bit brief, but basically what happens is Socrates, he's being tried for whatever the Athenians are imprisoning him and wanting to kill him for. And they go to the oracle, and the oracle, he has the question to the oracle, which is, who is there anyone wiser than I am or I was? And the oracle, the Pythian prophetess, said, there's no man wiser. And basically what it is saying the gods have dictated that, hey, gods know everything, and therefore they're telling the humans through the oracle that, look, you are the wisest man. There's no one wiser. And so Socrates, being the wisest man, I guess, appointed by or dictated by the gods, is saying, well, I don't think I am. I mean, if let's say I find someone wiser, that means the gods are not all knowing, and therefore I am not the wisest. But then it's kind of a catch-22 if you think about it, because if he does find someone who's wiser, he's probably the wisest man for knowing that there is someone who's wiser, and therefore wiser than probably even some of the gods. But therefore, does that make him the wisest? I mean, does that make him the wisest by knowing that there's someone wiser than him? How can someone, I mean, he's the second wisest person, to find who the wisest person is. It takes, and say the wisest person didn't know, would certainly know who the second wisest person was, maybe, or the third. I mean, maybe, who knows? But anyways, by finding someone who's wiser, he would just also prove the gods wrong, and he would probably gain a lot of knowledge from this person who's wiser. If he's wrong, well, gods are right, and how would he know for sure? Because he doesn't think he's the wisest person in the world. Maybe he does, but it's a tough one. It's a weird one. I don't know why he even went. I think he only went to find out just because to find out. That's the only reason I could think of. It's not necessarily say 5 billion people said Einstein was an idiot. It's like, what makes you think Einstein's an idiot? 5 billion people said,
Uh-oh, what's happening here?
Einstein was an idiot. It's like, oh, that's something weird that DLive does. I'm gonna have to remember that. So it's like, well, all of us, most of us, we've got 5 billion people saying he's an idiot, so therefore he's an idiot. It's like, this guy had great imagination. He was great at math, physics, etc. He had a lot of inventions. What have you done? It's like, well, I haven't done anything, but me and a bunch of other people as a collective, we've I don't know, maybe they didn't create anything. We produced an economic benefit for ourselves, and therefore we know that we're smart because we have a lot of money. We've made a lot more money that as a collective than Einstein. Therefore, we're definitely smart because we're more successful. It's like, wait, you're defining the success by monetary, financial means and property means? And they're going, yes, as a collective, that's what we agree upon. So that is what success is. It's like, you are mad. Yeah, that's just the most idiotic thing I've ever heard of. And the masses are going, what, you're just calling us idiots? And I go, yeah. I go, well, we are going to put you in prison and we are going to probably kill you for saying such a harmful thing. It's like, what? How does that harm you? You guys are supposed to be more successful than me, even, because as an individual, I'm nowhere near going to be as financially successful as all of y'all. And they go, well, therefore you were wrong. It's like, how does that ever work? But that's just kind of the way it was and currently is going, and it boggles the mind. It does. And therefore, and this gets into politics later, and those who don't understand politics or what philosophy back then, what I'm hearing is philosophy is people who find out things for themselves. It's kind of like the truther or the researcher that those in the alternative / independent media people are into, is people who just want to, not just through books but through trial and error, through thinking for themselves, and just get to the essential truth of things that are and or might be, and test it out, think it out logically, or just experiment and not base it off of someone else's results. They may compare notes, or see someone else's results and say, hey, how did you get to this result, and repeat it. And that's where we get the scientific method and experimentation, scientific experimentation and stuff like that. That's no longer being the case. What's happening now in the science community is the masses of the scientists saying, we agree with this more than your little experiment that shows us that there's a possibility that the current theory has its flaws. It's like, well, isn't that the point of science, to question into that? The more questions that there are, the more experiments against supposed theory makes that theory stronger, that it holds up much better because of constant testing against it. It's like, oh, well, that's what it's supposed to be, but right now it doesn't matter. It's just consensus now. It's what scientists in the community can have as far as a consensus of belief, not necessarily consensus of testing. Therefore, whenever people will tell me, don't question it, just accept it, it's like, no, I will always question. And Richard Feynman's great quote of his is, I would rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned. I would never want to live in a world, and I will always fight against it. Maybe I will always. I wouldn't want to live. I would force myself to live into a world where you can't question the answers, but I will always question the answers. And they're gonna have to kill me for it. Imagine that, having a society that will kill people for questioning an answer that's given, because the masses believe in that answer regardless if it's true or not. That's the way it is. You can't question. You're going to be ridiculed, you're going to be sued, you're going to be imprisoned, you're going to be shut down, you're whatever. The freedom that you have is going to be dictated by the masses, by consensus. And therefore, you know, maybe I'm starting to think that Plato had something going with the entire political idea of philosopher kings. I mean, it's tough because I'm getting to the. I've been at the point where I see anarchy, people ruling themselves as the ideal, but I don't think that'll ever get there. So therefore, before you get to the point, you're going to need philosopher kings, people who've seen that ether, the consciousness, they went outside the cave, they saw what they saw the truth that there is, and they're trying to let everyone know that there's something out there. And the state, the slave owners, the shackles, people who put the shackles on these slaves in the cave are saying are preventing those to go outside. It's illegal to go outside the cave. You can't go outside the cave. You're going to be penalized. It's illegal. And then some of them will go outside the cave anyways, illegal or not. And they're going to go, oh my goodness, guys, you guys have to see what's outside the cave. Here, let me free you guys. No, shut up. We're watching The Shadows. It's a good one. This time it's, about this time, there's the caravan with the beautiful ladies. They're coming, and we want to stay here and watch it. It's like, it's important. Just come out for a second. You guys, it's on every night. Why don't you just skip a day, skip a night? Like, no, are you crazy? We're not skipping this. It's like, you just and I find that correlation hard to believe that this happened 2,500 years ago, and it's still happening now. I mean, what things are there that still happen like that in the world? 2,500 years teaches us nothing. From what we dictate today, even as one of the greatest philosophical minds ever, of Socrates and Plato, or at least some of the first, and we're not going to listen to them. Yeah, it's still true today, after almost 2.5 millennia. That's got to resonate with some people. I mean, what is out there that's lasted, aside from certain religions, which have changed over the millennia, that we still use and has not changed for that long? And this is just the way things are in life. That hasn't changed. I mean, it'd be like I don't know, some fashion sense that's been unchanged for 2,500 years. I don't know. That just maybe sideburns or something. I don't know. It just, gosh. I mean, why am I alone in having this conversation with myself? But yeah. So the thought of, look, these politicians that we have now, and I don't think anyone likes any of the politicians. Maybe some people. I mean, some people love Obama. Some people love Bush. Some people love Trump. Some people love Hillary Clinton still. And the thought is, they're never going to do anything good for you. You're just in that little community where it says, we like this person and we like you if you like this person. And You know what? If you say good things about this person, we'll say good things about you. Heck, we'll probably even give you money. We'll give you free advertising. We'll give you this. We'll give you that. It's like, now you're in part of this big group. Welcome to our team. Team blue, team red, team green, team purple, team yellow, whatever team, team orange. It's like, at the end of the day, we're all on the same team. Either, I guess maybe not. At the end of the day, it's just team freedom or team slave. Well, actually, team master slave / slave. You can't be a slave without masters. So therefore, if you are a slave, you've got masters. If you're free, you can do whatever you want. Let's see how free you are. I don't think so. But what is total freedom? Maybe it's something with natural law. You're not affecting someone else's property without their consent. So you can't take or borrow or whatever from someone else, especially in a negative way. Most likely those ways are negative, without their consent, whether it's killing them, raping them, stealing from them, etc. So natural law is important. You guys can see some of my older videos on that with Mark Passio and even a couple of other people who touch on natural law. But then there's man-made law, which you pretty much gonna dictate what another man or woman are gonna tell you to do, and you do it. And if not, they have the ability to enslave you, put you in prison, take money away from you, kill you even. You think that's freedom? I don't think so. You got a king or a president that says, come here, suck my, you know what? It's like, are you going to do it? If you believe you're free, you're going to say no. F you. And you think you're going to get away with that if you're in North Korea and Kim Jong-un says that to you? You're going to be beheaded. You're going to be killed. So you're probably going to be like, my life is important. Yeah, I'll do it. So that's your, hey, whatever works for you. If you want to live that way, that's great. I'd probably say fuck you, or bite his thingy off and say ha 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 ha. That's a gross thought, but who knows what I would do. Same thing with any president out there. They'll tell you to do something, you don't do it. Most likely they're gonna be pissed off at you. They're gonna do something you don't like. And is that right? I don't think so. What is justice? Is justice different than for someone who's rich than someone who's poor? Is it justice different for someone who's one skin color or one gender or than someone else? What the hell? Am I still on? I'm still on. How did that happen? That's weird. Now it's got a different, I don't think anyone's going to be able to join. That's never happened to me before, people. I've never had Zoom close on me like that, ever. Maybe it's because no one joined, and I don't have anyone else joining. That's really weird. Anyways, not that anyone could join now. I'd have to update the description. Anyways, this won't be long. It's been 2 hours, 5 minutes. I've probably been talking for an hour more than I would ever want to talk. But it's good. I think a lot of people should have conversations with themselves. When I was a kid, I used to talk to myself a lot. I got ridiculed a lot. They go, why are you talking to yourself? You shouldn't talk to yourself. That's kind of creepy. So I stopped talking to myself. I would just talk out loud. Look, it's fine if you think to yourself, to have conversations with yourself within your own head. But once you start talking to yourself, just talking out loud your thoughts, people just start eyeing you weird. They think you're crazy. It's like, look, the only difference is that I'm actually saying my thoughts out loud. Why is that creepy? You want me to keep it in my head? But yeah, that's just the societal thing to do. Even if no one's around, even if you can't hear me, well, I'm walking back and forth, and when I hear you talking to yourself, it just creeps me out. Even if it's for a second, it's like, well, fine, then get creeped out. I'm gonna talk to myself in my own home, whatever, or in the library, or in classroom, whatever, or you got headphones on, you can take it off and you hear me talking, or they won't even hear you. They go, your mouth's moving. It's like, what if I was just chewing on gum? It looks like you're forming words. It's just creeping me out, dude. Don't talk to yourself. I think one of the problems is maybe people don't talk to themselves, think to themselves enough. Maybe I had that same problem because I watched that Joe Rogan, and I will look at Dr. Paul Stamets, Lurkster. I saw the Joe Rogan interview with the Tesla founder guy, the weird guy. He says he doesn't stop thinking because it's like a faucet that you can't turn off. I think I had that same problem too. I don't think I'm as weird as that guy. Gosh, why can't I remember his name? Let me see if I can find it. Elon Musk. Oh man, what kind of name is that? And of course, my name's Ebon, so who am I to judge? Yeah, he says that he just kind of doesn't sleep. I don't sleep until I'm tired, and throughout that time when I'm awake, I'm always thinking. I didn't think that was odd. I thought a lot of people do that, but apparently not. Do you guys, maybe who's watching or who will be watching, put it in the comments. Do you always think when you're around? I mean, when you're up, when you're awake? Or do you just kind of, you're not thinking? I've never really thought about asking anyone that question. So that was a weird thing for me to hear, that Elon Musk is that way, and that he thinks it's an oddity and it's a rarity. Isn't that weird? You live in a world filled with people that you've talked to, hundreds if not thousands, millions of people in your life, and you've never talked about that, whether they're always thinking when they're awake, when they're always trying to create something, plan something, see something in their head, or yeah. Please don't tell me and Elon Musk and maybe a few other weird people are like that. There's got yeah, that creeps me out. That someone talking to themselves out loud doesn't creep me out, but just that thought that I might be the only one of a few people in the world like Elon Musk that just always thinks. It's like, why am I not creating or faking creating so many things? Again, I'm thinking, and I don't like talking out loud. I've gotten so used to talking to myself within my head instead of talking out loud. It's a habit. But now that I'm in front of a camera and you want me to talk about what I'm thinking inside my head, have you thought about that at all? If you saw a normal, everyday person talking to himself, you think he was crazy. You think he's nuts. But you know what? All of you, or most all of you that watch independent media, or even mainstream media, corporate media, are watching people talking to themselves out loud. I mean, there's no one in this room. I know people might be watching, are watching, not a lot. But I'm pretty much talking about the thoughts that are in my head. I'm talking to myself, basically. No one around. And yet, when you see that in real life, when someone's not in front of a camera, you're thinking, oh, that guy's creepy. Anyways. It's late. I should get some sleep so I'm not sick or get worse. But anyways, I love these types of topics, conversations. Even though if it's conversation to myself, I would love having conversation with others. I would ask others. I gotta ask that to someone who's next on. Are you always thinking when you're awake? Is there a time that you stop? Like I can even when it's peaceful, like I'm out fishing, it's peaceful, it's quiet, there's no one around, just me and nature, and I'm observing how beautiful it is and just how quiet and peaceful, and just like when I'm meditating. But when I'm meditating, I don't think of nothing. I always think of something of nothing, and therefore I'm still thinking. But I'm still in that peaceful stage. I'm still in that mindful stage. But some people state like you're focusing on something, like you're focusing on breathing, just your breathing. The idea of meditation, for some, or maybe for most, is just the spiritual aspect, whatever that means. The other part is the physical. In order to get to that part, you have to break things down into the most basic parts. What's the most basic thing that you do to live? That's breathe. So all you focus on is your breath. But when I'm focusing on my breath, I'm just, in order to, maybe that's what the spiritual aspect is when you're actually in meditation, that you understand that all the thoughts come to you. It's a free flow of thoughts and feelings and emotions, that you're not putting the valve on something. You're not constricting it and preventing it from coming through. Because think of it of everything that is out there that moves, whether it's just like how Nikola Tesla calls it, all the things that we can't see or feel, the energy, the frequencies. We know that there's frequencies out there. We know that there's energy out there, especially like sunlight and things like that. Particulates in the air that we might get some form of energy by breathing in, who knows? Or harmfulness if it's like gas, certain gases. And then the vibrations, we might feel the wind hit us, we might feel like a loud music playing, and we're not just listening to it, but we're feeling it with our bodies. It's we are our conscious, not your consciousness, our conscious self, our physical self, we're always feeling and partitioning things off. You don't want to be flooded with it. Whenever I watch Man of Steel, the new Superman stuff, it reminds me of it. There's so much esoteric stuff in it, that we learn to control all the things that we're exposed to. From early on to later, it's all about control. How do we control it? And when you want to, we're always limiting. We're always limiting. That's what it is. In order to focus, we have to limit everything and just focus on one thing. That's what most meditation is, what they're trying to have you do, is just focus on one thing, which is the breathing. But in the result of that, and the most basic form is, it's about the control. You can't control not breathing, because if you control not breathing, you're dead. So it's about letting go of your control, let your body go through the motions that its most basic form is, which is breathing. And another part of that is acknowledging the things that are out there that you control yourself not to see, not to hear, not to smell, not to touch, not to think about. So my form of meditation is a lot different than what a lot of people have. My form of meditation is, once you're at that basic self and you understand that all it is your breathing, you're letting go of the control of controlling everything into one focus. I think that's the wrong approach to meditation, but hey, I may be wrong. I've been wrong a lot, I guess. I've been right a lot, but who knows? But I just let it all in. I meditate. I've learned to meditate that way, through not being still. Moving, walking, running, whatever I'm doing, I'm in that meditative state where I control the amount of information that my physical body has learned to control over the years, and not limit it in any way. So I'm always thinking, I'm always letting thoughts in, I'm always letting ideas formulate, whether they go fizzle or not. I just keep them going. I do try to focus on certain things, but I also try not to focus. It's kind of like, instead of micromanagement, it's just macro. It's just like, okay, this is here, this is that, this needs to happen this year. So I don't ever really plan on a lot of things. I understand that there's planning that's useful, especially when more people are involved. But I like, it's kind of, I go by the flow. That's what a lot of people say. That's kind of what I do. And the weird thing is things change so fast, so rapidly, that the planning gets scrapped anyway, and you have to kind of adapt and fluctuate. And therefore, it's happened so many times that, well, I'm just gonna have to adapt and fluctuate, because I can't focus on one thing. Because if I focus on one thing, I'm putting all my eggs into one basket, and something bad happens, well, shit, I've got nothing left in the basket. I've got no basket. Anyways, why do I keep going off into these tangents? I hope my kids grow up and they watch this, if they can find it, if it's still there. Maybe even people who are alive who might want to understand, who are close to me, will listen and actually think about it, and not just say, oh, this is what crazy looks like. No, I don't think I'm crazy. I think the world is crazy. I think a lot of people are crazy because they get so angry at the world and at the people who actually have no power or have no will to control the way things are, to make it worse. And people make things worse all the time, and those are the people who are in control. And people think the people who aren't in control are the ones making things worse. Which is crazy to me. I don't know if that's crazy to you. It's crazy to me. I'm probably sure that if there's the people that watch the couple million viewed videos and snippets out there, are probably going, yeah, this is one crazy motherfucker. All right, good night, everybody.